This video was brought to you by Skillshare. If you only read the headlines, you might assume that Poland has one of the most anti-immigration governments in the EU. The incumbent Law and Justice Party are perhaps the most vocal opponents of the EU's new migrant relocation scheme. They worry that Muslims immigrating into Poland threaten Christianity, and they literally built a fence on the border with Belarus to prevent migrants coming into the EU. However, for the past 6 months or so, the Polish government has been rocked by a scandal involving allegations that they sold as many as 200,000 visas for bribes at their consulates in a bunch of African and Asian countries. While the government has unsurprisingly denied the allegations, the story threatens to undermine their re-election, especially given the campaign's focus on immigration issues, and has prompted some irritation in the EU and in Germany. So in this video, we're going to have a look at the allegations, whether it'll affect Law and Justice's chances at the upcoming election, and how it's played into the ongoing feud between Poland, the European Commission, and Germany. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. So, this story really begins on August the 31st, when officials from Poland's anti-corruption agency raided the foreign ministry as part of an investigation into an illegal scheme, where law and justice officials at Polish consulates in foreign countries were allegedly selling EU visas to non-EU nationals for about $5,000 and other bribes. Almost immediately after the raid, Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki fired a deputy foreign minister, claiming that he wanted to, quote, ensure absolute transparency and honesty with the investigation, and that the minister's dismissal was to prove that there could be, quote, no doubts. This wasn't enough to quell the story, and a few days later, Poland's public prosecutor charged 7 people with corruption, 3 of whom have been detained. Polish media then reported that more than 250,000 people, mostly from African and Asian countries, were allowed into Poland via the scheme over the past 2.5 years, and there were reports that the Law and Justice Party had instructed consulates to accept a certain number of visas, with an anonymous foreign ministry official telling Polish media that in one unnamed African country there were literally stands in front of the Polish embassy where you could buy stamped visas and then just write your name in. With the pressure mounting, in mid-September, the government admitted that hundreds of visas were sold illegally, but argued that the numbers were much lower than the hundreds of thousands claimed by the media. Morawiecki insisted that, quote, there is no problem of illegal immigrants in Poland, and accused opposition leader Donald Tusk of trying to create an alternative false reality. Soon after, the Foreign Ministry released a statement announcing that they had fired their head of legal and were carrying out an extraordinary audit of all Polish consulates. The statement also tried to, at least partly, pin the blame on the previous administration, noting that while the Foreign Ministry would be cancelling all contracts with private companies involved in visa processing, they only had to use these private companies because the previous administration closed down parts of the Foreign Office. If these allegations are true, then they would partly explain why Poland issues so many visas relative to its European neighbours. For context, while Poland hasn't admitted its numbers for 2022 to Eurostat yet, in 2021, Poland issued nearly 800,000 work visas to non-EU citizens, more than half granted by the entire EU. The visa holders are supposed to only stay in Poland, but because Poland is part of the Schengen area, they can't really be stopped from moving around the EU, and many of them have apparently moved west into Germany. Earlier this year, the German states of Brandenburg and Saxony both called for temporary reintroduction of border controls with Poland, after German authorities recorded a 77% year-on-year increase in irregular migrants, excluding Ukrainian refugees, with more than 204,000 asylum applications in the 12 months to August. News website Onet has even reported that some of the visa recipients used their visas to travel to Mexico and then into the US, which might not go down too well in Washington. Both Germany and the European Commission have asked the Polish government to clarify what exactly went on in its consulates, and Germany has deployed hundreds more border police officers to the German-Polish border in recent weeks. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz took things up a notch over the weekend when he accused Law and Justice of, quote, waving through immigrants into Germany, and warned that Germany might have to resort to unspecified additional measures if things continued. Clearly, this is going to become another point of tension in the German-Polish relationship, which has been strained ever since Putin's invasion, with Poland regularly criticising Germany for not doing enough to support Ukraine, but has hit a new low recently because the Polish government has been calling for reparations from Germany for what happened in World War II, which hasn't gone down all that well in Berlin. So anyway, will these allegations actually hurt Law and Justice at the upcoming election? Well, you'd think so, for two reasons. First, they made the government look corrupt, and, well, that's generally not a good look for governments. But second, if these reports are true, they undermine the government's anti-immigration credentials. This is an especially difficult problem for the government, because they focused their re-election campaign on their tough stance on migrants, even floating the construction of a wall along the border with Belarus, and because they're already being attacked for being not anti-immigrant enough by Confederation, a new right-wing upstart that's currently polling on 10%. The allegations have also provided some much-needed ammunition for Civic Coalition, the main opposition party led by former European Council President Donald Tusk, who's been stuck about 7 points behind Law and Justice for the last few months. Tusk has tried to capitalise on the crisis, describing it as the biggest scandal of the 21st century in Poland, and charged Law and Justice with hypocrisy for weaponising Muslim immigration while simultaneously selling visas in Muslim-majority countries. Unfortunately for Tusk, the scandal doesn't seem to have had much of an effect on the headline polling. While there have been a couple of individual polls showing Law and Justice down a few points, Politico's poll of polls currently suggests that Law and Justice still have a 9-point lead over Civic Coalition. Now, there's a chance that the scandal might still affect Law and Justice's chance of forming a government by deterring other smaller parties and would-be coalition partners from going into coalition with them, given that they're not currently on track for an outright majority. But as things stand, it looks like the government's electoral prospects haven't been massively affected. Things are expected to change with a story like this, so make sure you stay on top of updates. That way you know what's going on, and let's be honest, it always feels great to stay on top of things. Even within TLDR, a few of us have been brushing up our InDesign skills in order to create the newspaper we're currently working on. It turns out that making a professional-looking newspaper is pretty difficult, so we headed to Skillshare to take their course on the topic. Unlike when I tried to learn InDesign for another never-released project a few years ago, this time I was guided through the process quickly and effectively, and this time the project will actually see the light of day thanks to Skillshare's incredibly easy-to-follow guides. It's not just that either. You likely already knew Skillshare for classes on things like photography, editing and illustration, but Skillshare also has hundreds of career-focused classes too. We all know at this stage that traditional jobs aren't one size fits all. I mean, I finished university and came straight into a job at a YouTube channel. That's not necessarily the path that you want to take, but the courses on Skillshare can help you design a career to fit you. There's courses on everything from how to start a business to maximising your workflow or how to grow in e-commerce. Another course that Jack's actually taking to help with the newspaper project. And if you use our link, you can get access to all of that for free. That's right, the first 1,000 people to use the link will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare.